Natalie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited for this conversation because every time we talk, I feel like I learned so much. I went to grad school for the brain, and every time I talk to you, I'm like, my goodness, like I had no idea about any of this. So thank you, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah.
You created our simple neuroscience videos, which are a huge hit on our channel. So first of all, thank you. After you've been done interning with us, can you tell us what are you up to right now?
So now I'm a master's student at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and I study neuroimmunology, which I know sounds really big and complicated, but it's really just how the immune system and the brain interact. And so what I look at specifically is the immune system's response to spinal cord injury and how your immune system and your gut microbiome play a role together in helping you heal from major injuries like a spinal cord injury.
I read one of your papers that got published, and I think I understood 3 words on it. Even ChatGPT could not get me through this. I was like, explain it to me like I'm 5, and it still couldn't figure it out, right? And this is what I want to talk to you about today, is you've become a tremendous learner. You've learned how you learn. And I want to ask you a bunch of questions about that.
Yeah.
I've known you for a long time. I've known you since you were in 8th grade. And ever since I knew you from the outside, you have just been the superstar. Like you've come into class and you've done so much research and your preparation has been head and shoulders above everybody else. And then you've also been a stud athlete and you've had all these things on your plate and you've performed highly. I've always found that fascinating how you juggle all this. And we know that sometimes there's a dark side to this perfectionism thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you categorize yourself as someone who's a perfectionist?
It's to a fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
On the outside, a lot of people see this perfectionism thing and it looks good, right? When you post on social media and it looks really good. But tell me about what it's like to have all this on your plate. So let's start in high school. What all did you do and what did your days look like?
I did everything in high school. So I was very much of the mentality that if you didn't do it all, you weren't going to do well, which is absolutely not true. But I had to learn that way later on. So my days were extracurriculars, all of the advanced subjects in school, and sports. So I would do my full school day, which was typically a couple AP classes. I took a lot of AP sciences. That's always been what I've been focusing on. And then I was in 10 clubs at different times throughout high school. I have no idea how I did that. But I was a president of a club. I had a whole bunch of different involvements. And then I would go to volleyball practice for like 3 hours every night, all week. And then I would do my homework. And so I was jam-packed full and school used to start at 7:30 in the morning. So I was starting way early and finishing really late.
So basically it was 6 a.m. when you get up to start to get ready for school.
Yeah.
To what time at night would you start to wind down?
11:30. Yeah.
Was this something that's, did your family push you towards this or was this just an internal thing?
I think it was mostly me. I think maybe in middle school, my parents would have been like, oh yeah, you should try and get good grades. And then I just took that little bit of encouragement and blew it way out of proportion. So it was mostly me.
One of the fascinating things about perfectionism is often I think people from the outside look at the parents like they're driving this. Most perfectionist people I've met, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
It's like you said, there's a little bit of positive reinforcement and then you take it to the extreme.
I also think that perfectionists find each other. So I was absolutely in a friend group where we were all in AP classes. We were all in extracurriculars. We were all in sports. And when that's your normal, that's who you compare yourself to. And so even if your parents are like, oh, you don't need to do that, you're like, well, this person and this person and this person are. So if they can handle it, I can handle it. That's
a great point. I mean, what percentage of student do you think that is, at least from your experience? Is that 50% of students, 10% of students?
I would say 10%. And it's a 10% in different ways because you have the people that are like, I want to go D1 sports in university. And that's one type of perfectionism. So they cover part of it. And then there's the people that want to go into some crazy thing in university, which is more what I was on. So you get the sports perfectionists and then you get the academic perfectionists. And they all sort of mix in there.
Yeah. And when you're in it, I'm sure it feels like it's 100%. Because like you said, that's all you know.
That's all you know. And also because of AP classes, you get used to that group of students that you're with. You are not in classes with people that aren't in that cohort. And so those are the people you compare yourself to.
What was your goal in high school? What did you think you were going to do?
I think my goal in high school was to give myself the most opportunities that I could. I wanted to just be the best I could be. And even though I was also the best at things that I didn't need to even bother with. And that has been a sorting out process since then.
Absolutely. Well, it's because what's interesting about what we do in executive function, I never associated it with the perfectionist student who they have to be the best all the time. And what happens is we don't prioritize. Some of the stuff we get obsessed with just really doesn't matter for you reaching your goals. And that's what I hear you speaking to.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I was in a politics club. I have not used a single thing from that. Like, why was I doing?
Because when you set your goal, it is a little bit fuzzy, right? Like, I want to give myself the most opportunities.
I did not have a concrete goal at all. It was just do the best.
Yeah. And when we're doing that, sometimes we get involved in everything.
Yeah.
And we have to be the best in everything.
Yeah.
Did that take a toll over time? This 6 a.m. to 10, 11 p.m. grind every day?
I don't think I noticed it until I was finally out of it. And that probably wasn't until COVID. And I was finally in a space where I wasn't in classes all the time. There wasn't extracurriculars to be doing. I was just doing school. And I was like, how was I balancing all this? And then after COVID, I really started prioritizing fun time and free time. And because I think COVID really made me realize that I wasn't taking advantage of all the things I could have been doing that would have made me feel more fulfilled.
That's really, you're the first person I've spoken to your age who, like, it was a gift. There was a reflection period in there.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I did not enjoy it. Yeah. But it was a good chance of being like, oh, I miss all the things that I enjoy doing. And I want to be doing more of the things that I enjoy and less of the things that I feel like I have to be doing.
When you had a second to like sit still and breathe, like, did you notice how run down you were?
Yeah, for sure. I was just exhausted. And I also didn't know what else to do with my time. So like even during COVID, I would get up at like 7 and start working and work until 11 because I didn't know anything else to do. Yeah.
Anxiety's weird like that. Because I'm built like that too, where when I get highly anxious, like I'll just like pace the house and look for stuff and it just won't stop. And other people with their anxiety, they like just kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And either kind, you're not really doing anything productive, right?
Yeah.
But it is weird how anxiety works like that.
Yeah.
How did you work yourself through this?
Trial and error. A lot of it, I think, was that I consciously wanted to do more things that I wanted to be doing. And I actually found that being an intern here was probably the best for it, was because I had set work hours and I had never had set work hours before. And so I actually clocked in and clocked out, which then I was able to be like, okay, I was actually able to get a ton done in my 40-hour work week. And I'm like, I could probably get almost as much done as I was getting like for school in a 40-hour work week. So then I tried, when I went back to university, I tried to have set work hours. And that was great. I actually had like free weekends and free evenings because I wasn't forcing myself to fill all my time with different things.
That's interesting. So you set up your school week and you're busy. No buts about it. You are busy, but you set it up where it's basically like a 9-to-5 job where you start at a certain time, you end at a certain time, and you force yourself to turn off. Yeah.
I think a lot of people that I talk to, they're in the last year of university are so scared to go into a 9-to-5 job because they're like, I have no freedom. It's so much control. I have no time, free time. And I was like, let me tell you, I had more free time than I had ever had having a 9-to-5 job because I was forced to stop. And that was like the biggest gift ever, was having an end time.
That is interesting, especially for someone who is a perfectionist. It's giving yourself clear deadlines, because we know perfectionists work really well against deadlines. Yeah. Anxiety ramps a little bit and you get it done. So you would get everything done by, let's say, 5 p.m. on a Friday and actually unplug every weekend.
Yep.
What would you do with that time to recharge?
I got so many ski days in because I was here in Colorado. So I skied, I hiked, I climbed, I did all of the outdoor things that I love to do. And then I felt like I worked better because I had all of this outdoor exercise time. So I was just more recharged and happy and actually able to work better.
So you were more productive in your time at work, working less.
Yeah.
That's the mental shift that most people can't make.
Yeah.
I'm guilty as well.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a worker just like you. Yeah. And so I think it's really hard for us to understand we'll be twice as productive if we take the time to turn off.
Yeah. And I had to have it kind of almost forced upon me. If I had tried to implement that in a school day, I don't think I would have been able to do it as successfully. It had to be in a completely different environment. And then I could bring it back to school.
Got it. Let me ask you about the most anxiety-producing task from every perfectionist student I know, and that's studying. When someone tells you to study, there's no beginning, there's no ending. You can never be too prepared for a test.
Right.
How do you think about studying now?
I feel like I started thinking about studying a lot differently after I've taken a lot of neuroscience classes, because now I understand what studying is doing. I think a lot of students think about studying as a task, that they're like, I need to check off this task in order to be prepared for my test. And now I realize that studying is a process, and it doesn't just start right before the test. Studying is a long-term process because that's how your brain remembers things. So I like to think of the brain as like, you know, on your phone when you get iCloud storage full and you go into your pictures and you're like, I don't need the picture of my thumb. I don't need the screenshot from 5 years ago. I don't need all these things. Your brain does that every single day. It goes in and it prunes out all of the not important memories. And so what studying does is it puts that importance tag on your memory so that you can actually remember it when you get to the test, because you don't want your brain to toss it out thinking it's just like a screenshot of your thumb, right? So I think that studying now, knowing more about the brain, is a lot different than studying before I knew more.
So first of all, Natalie does our simple neuroscience videos on our channel, and they're so popular and people love them. So I highly recommend those, and I have so many questions for you about that.
Yeah.
The number one question I receive, especially from high school and college students, is I show up to the test, and we call it test anxiety, but essentially their mind goes blank. Now, there could be high levels of anxiety, but I think more often than not, we're just not getting information from short-term to long-term memory. Talk me through how you do that.
Yeah. So the way that our brain encodes long-term memories is that they put two types of importance tags on them. So that's either an emotional importance tag. So like you don't forget the day that you graduated from high school. That has an emotional importance tag on it. And then you get an importance tag from use. So bringing it from long-term to short-term. So the more times you recall it is also a way that you can like put that importance tag on it. And so in that moment when you like can't remember, a lot of times it's good to remember things that are in the periphery of you were trying to like remember it. So for me, if I'm in a test and I'm like, I do not remember this, I try to remember what color was the teacher writing on the chalkboard in? Did something happen that day in the lecture that I remember that was like a key moment? Did someone drop their water bottle? Did something else happen that could like help me remember the whole scenario and the whole situation? And so I try to remember other things that could have put an importance tag on that memory. That's one thing that I try to do.
So putting an importance tag on it, and if it's a lecture type format, it sounds like you're incorporating multiple sensory inputs. Is that a good way to think about this?
Absolutely. So studying is just doing active recall. So the like memory term is active recall, and that's bringing it from long term to short term. And so when you think of recall, minus the active part, that would be, say you reread your notes and you go, yeah, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. You know, you just re-remember it again.
That's like the stereotypical science, biology 101.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the thing that's so ingrained in all of our brains. So you read it again, you go, oh yeah, that's true. You reading it, that's recall, but not necessarily active recall. Active recall is multimodal, which means that it has different sensory components to it. So we've talked a lot about the one-pager or the cheat sheet, which is then you've read it, you've recalled it, and then the active portion is writing it again. So then you're bringing in a motor or a movement aspect of rewriting it. There's a lot of other ways to do it as well. Interpersonal things are really good. We're social creatures, so our brains remember things that we do with other people more than things that we remember that we do on our own. So if you have a list of things that you need to remember, so like vocab terms, and you go through them and you're like, I remember this. You do that recall, not the active, but the recall, and then you give it to somebody else and they quiz you, that's the active portion. And that's what's really going to help you remember. So writing it again, having someone ask you about it, or acting it out. That one feels silly, but is like a weird way of doing it. Or teaching somebody else. I find that that's a really, really good one. If you have something, someone says, teach me about this, and then you can actually pull out that information and give them a mini lecture on it, you know it. You absolutely know that information. And then when you get to the test is like the person asking you the question, and you can recite that back on the exam.
We didn't go through it. It's always hard when this light gets on you, right? It's like
I don't know what to do with
it's right there. There you go.
Did I get it?
I think so. The life of curly hair. That was a really good answer. Really good answer. Okay.
Right.
Bunch of follow-up questions.
Yeah,
being a former teacher. And so I was a special education teacher, so I had to teach many different subjects. And I always thought I know something. And then I got in front of the class and I was like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Because it is that, you have to really understand something deeply in order to teach it. So that is the number one recommendation from me. I want to go in more into the one-pager because you introduced me to this and someone else here did too. This idea of taking, let's say you're in a psychology, an AP psychology class, and you have 3 to 4 chapters and you have to boil it down into one page or a note card.
Yeah.
That's really effective.
Yeah.
Why is that so effective?
2 reasons. One is that it's a time effect. So right before your big exam at the end of the semester, you don't have a lot of time to be going back through and studying everything again. But at the end of that unit, say at the beginning of September, when you actually did the unit, it's fresh in your brain and you have the time to make the note card. And you're saving yourself time in the future of studying it way at the end. So that's one reason why it's effective, is that you're actually starting the study process earlier. The second reason is that it's forcing you to do that active recall when the information is fresh. So instead of going to the end of the semester and being like really working hard to pull that information out, you actually might have gotten to the point where your brain's gotten rid of it, because your brain does that active process where it gets rid of things. So instead of getting to the point where it's already gone and then having to relearn it, you're just putting the importance tag on early so that you can find it again later.
Yeah, the people I know like you who have done this, where let's say there's 3 or 4 big tests out the semester or during the semester for an AP class or for college. It blows my mind every time how you guys aren't stressed at the end of the semester, because you're just reviewing 3 or 4 sheets of paper while the rest of us are going back through hundreds of pages and trying to find all this stuff. And so I've always really admired that method. So thank you for introducing that to me.
Yeah, it's great.
The other piece of it is your notes are really visual.
Yes.
I've seen your note. There's a ton of pictures in there. It's not what I thought someone like you would produce. I thought it'd be very neatly handwritten Cornell notes. And that's not what it is at all.
Yeah. I find that I might be a perfectionist in my life as a whole, but I'm not a perfectionist in my notes, in my tidiness. I know that if I can keep it together overall, there's some things that you can let go. So I believe that a perfectly tidy, nice notes sheet is not actually remembering anything. I think that if you can connect it to something else, that's when you're going to really remember things. So for instance, I was learning about the blood coagulation cascade in a biochemistry class, which is just how your blood clots. And I've had to take a medication that had something to do with blood clotting. And so I know, okay, in my notes, as I'm writing down this whole cascade as the professor's teaching it, I write on the side, you took a drug that actually cancels this out. And so if you can bring your personal life in, or if you can draw a picture or a diagram to interconnect different aspects, then that's going to help you remember things way more. I love a flowchart. I write almost all of my notes in a flowchart. There are so many arrows, because I think that if you can do cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, that's absolutely how you remember things.
Yeah, I love looking at your notes. You've only shown me a few of them, but yeah. I just think there's so many, because again, you're writing this personal connection here, this personal connection here. And it's just fascinating because it's not how any of us were taught to take notes.
No.
And you're doing it in I don't know the right terminology, in a way that it will stick.
Mm-hmm.
You're connecting everything to previous learning.
Yep.
Is that how you're able to learn such high level concepts?
Yeah. Because you're not actually learning that much more. You want to minimize the amount of new learning that you're doing. Because if you have a good foundation, say you take a AP biology class, and then you take a first year college biology class, and then you take a second year neuroscience class, and then you take a third year cellular neuroscience class, and then you take a learning and memory class, and then by the time you get to that learning and memory specific neuroscience class, it's only that tiny little aspect, the learning part, that's new. Everything else you've learned before. So if you can just bring back the old information, you're not actually learning as much.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is you learned how you learn. And that is the ultimate gift here, because this is where I struggle having ADHD, is some of the strategies that work for you will work beautifully for me. They're backed up by neuroscience.
Yeah.
But I'm also unique, just like everyone here is. It is a lot of trial and error, a lot of reflecting when you're done. But at the end of the day, no matter how much the world changes or what happens, you know how you learn. And that's the ultimate gift here, which is fascinating to me, which is why I'm asking so many questions about it.
Yeah.
So we talked about the note card or the one pager. We talked about connecting to previous knowledge. We talked about active recall.
Mm-hmm.
What other learning methods come to mind when you're learning something that is just hard and you need to remember it?
This might not work for everybody, but I had a mom that I could FaceTime, and I would email her my notes and she would quiz me. And that was the biggest thing that got me through most of my really hard classes, is that she would be like, you wrote this. what does it mean? And I would have to explain it. Or she would ask me a definition and then I would have to recall it. And having that interpersonal part, that was really big for me because sometimes she would mispronounce one of the words because she's not in a field that I'm in.
Of course.
She doesn't necessarily know all of the nitty gritty of it. And she would like mispronounce one of the words, or she would connect it to a different word that she knew. And just her take on my notes helped me remember better because I would like look at that word again on the test and I'd be like, oh, she said that sounded like poodle. And then I would like remember what it was.
That sounds like a very real example.
Yeah.
And I don't think you pulled that one out of thin air. Yes, absolutely yes. And most of us do have someone which we will quiz us. Mm-hmm. If you don't, I actually use ChatGPT for that. It's got a voice mode now. And so that's how I give all my practice speeches. And I tell it, because it's way too nice to me. I tell it to be a little hard on me and give me really clear feedback. So a person is best to bounce this off of. Yeah. Because of what you're talking about. They'll mess things up, right? But if you get stuck, there are a bunch of AI tools which you can speak to now, which will quiz you.
And I also she wasn't available all the time. And I had lots of things that I needed to study for. And so what I used to do was I would record questions. I would read through my notes and in my voice memos, I would go, what does this bone do? What does this do? And I would ask the questions into the voice memo. And I would put my headphones in and I would go on a walk and I would pretend that I was on the phone. And I would just answer the questions as I asked them. And first off, recording the questions was great active recall. And then having to answer my own questions was really good. And I would just pause it, answer it, play it, pause it, answer it as I was walking around. And the walking part was also big.
You glossed over that. There's so much research behind walking, and whether it's studying or learning or listening or whatever. I do every book I read is through walking. My attention is just poor when I sit still. And I had to develop a method, which you developed your method, right? Yeah. Mine is just walking for 5-10 minutes and stopping, and then I'll either put a few notes in my phone about that, or I'll just write it in a little something. But that's what works for me. Yeah. If you have to learn something really hard, we're talking hard, and you have 5 days to do it. Final exam is on Friday. Today's Monday. Mm-hmm. Walk me through your thought process on how you would get there.
I had a course. It was neuroanatomy. It was the hardest course that I ever had to take. I had to memorize 300 terms and be able to identify them on the brain. And brain terms and brain areas are just gray mush. Like, it just all looks the same. For that class specifically, I had to pull out like all the stops for all of my study ways that I needed to learn. So there was 2 parts to that class. It was learning the terms and learning the locations. And so I had a book that had the pictures of all the locations, and I went in with sticky notes and I covered every single term that was labeled on every single page of the entire book. And I went through and I would sit in the library and I would write the word of what I thought the correct location was, and I would peel it back and check it. And if I got it wrong, I'd put a new sticky note on and I'd come back to it, and I would keep doing it until I could get it all right. And then for the terms, I used Quizlet. And I think that Quizlet was a great tool for me.
I think it's a great tool for everybody because you can use it in a lot of different ways. And now Notebook LM, that's another tool.
Yeah, that wasn't around when I was
young. Absolutely. But it's similarly a great tool as well because it's interactive, like what you said. Yeah. But I'm sorry. Go on.
So I would have it make tests for me, or I would use the learn feature, which was I would input all of these terms that I needed to know and then all the definitions, and then it would ask me and I would have to actively recall what they all were. And having it in a platform like that was really good because I could pause it, leave, come back, and keep going on it. And then my third one was the integrating of both, which was, for me, is always drawing because I'm a very visual learner. So I would draw the picture of the brain and label it and write what everything was and erase it and do it again and do it again and do it again on all the different things I needed to know. And I would reserve a library room with a chalkboard and I would just do it for hours. Go outside, stare at the sun, come back in.
Goodwill Hunting stuff, right? It's just a chalkboard. And actually you said something really quickly that I want to talk about as well. It's that giving your brain a rest, not scrolling on your phone, like giving it an actual rest to get it to long-term memory. Yep. Tell me more about that.
So I have a couple favorite rest activities that I do. One is that I went to university in Canada. It wasn't always possible to go outside during your break because you'd have to put your parka on and your shirt. Too many layers.
Yeah, it is a thing.
Yeah. So for like a 5-minute break, if I was in a university library or a high school library, what I would do is I would go and try and find the strangest book that I could find. Because if you're like actively searching the bookshelves for something, you're not thinking about anything else. You're not on your phone and you're walking. You're walking around like through all the stacks and being like the history of the centipede or like the really strange books that you can find in the like university libraries.
What is the strangest book you've ever found?
Some really strange stuff. There was this one really strange section that I found one time that was like in the stacks that you had to like crank open, and they were like old-fashioned histories of like pants. How pants were invented. And so, yeah, I would just walk around and look for the weirdest books I could find.
Would that refresh you?
Yeah, it would.
Well, and zooming out really quickly, what I just asked you and you answered quickly and beautifully. I didn't expect it to get to the history of pants. But what you just answered quickly and beautifully was, I asked you how you learned.
Yeah.
Something really hard. And you said you had an active learning method where you're covering things up.
Yep.
Then you went right to Quizlet. Then you went right to visual.
Yep.
And then you wandered around the library. But like you were able to tell me how you learned.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate gift here. That's something that you're going to use for the rest of your life. It is very rare that I have a conversation with most people. And I ask this question all the time.
Yeah.
If you have to learn something quickly that's super hard, what do you do?
Yeah.
Most people have no idea. And so that's the thing that I want to get across is
most people say reread their notes.
Correct.
And that's about the worst thing you can do.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so this is just the ultimate gift we can give ourselves. No matter what happens in the world, we're going to have to be able to learn and adapt and recognize new patterns and you know, just move really quickly. And so how long did that take for you to figure all this out though?
I feel like I started actively studying in high school, and I was really lucky because my mom was a really big force in this, and she would actually have me like study with her out loud, and that was huge. And then when I started learning like that worked really well for me, I would start adapting other methods that were similar. And then also like I've always done well with like tactile methods, and so I've tried like every study method, and I think that a lot of it was just me wanting to study in more efficient ways. So I just kept trying new things until I found things that worked for me. Like sometimes I found that Quizlet was better than like a stack of note cards for me because the amount of time it took to write out all the note cards was sometimes too much. So if I could just upload it, because like there's some AI features now in Quizlet where you just upload it and it makes the study cards, that could save me time. So like I just tried everything.
So saying all that, if you had to give broad advice, which is never great, it's never great for learning to give broad advice.
Yeah.
But if you had to give broad advice, what is your quick elevator pitch on when someone asks you how to learn quickly?
Yeah. Make it important to your brain. So that's going to be make it important in a bunch of different sensory ways. Use as many different methods as you can to learn a concept. So if you can teach it and you can do flashcards on it and you can draw it, you're going to know it. Just active recall in a bunch of different methods is the best way to learn.
Quick follow-up on that. With procrastination, a lot of us need a very high level of anxiety just to get started.
Yeah.
Is that what procrastination does? Like, do we just get to a point where it feels so important to our brain that we have to start and then we learn it? The people who cite anxiety as almost being a helpful thing to their learning?
Yeah. I think that anxiety pushes procrastination back more. For some people, I had a roommate. She could write a 20-page paper in one night the night before it was due. That is not me. My anxiety never would have let me get to that point.
It can get high, but that's a different level.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of people are like, my anxiety has really helped me in being on top of my tasks because I don't procrastinate as long. And I think a lot of people do resonate with that. But for people who do find that they push it off and they push it off and they push it off, learning in a way that doesn't feel like a fight is always good. If you think that, okay, what do I want to be doing right now? I want to be outside. I want to be not sitting here and studying. If you could like use something like Notebook LM, put it in your headphones and go outside and just walk around. And if that doesn't feel like a fight to your brain, then do it that way. I also used to do like homework procrastination. I think some people do this. They rank the homework that they have for that day of which one's going to suck the most and which one's going to suck the least. And sometimes giving your brain like, okay, this one's not too bad. Like, just do this one first, and then you'll get to the harder stuff. Sometimes that's nice. It's like it's a gateway into actually learning again.
Is that how it works for you? Is getting some momentum works well? Because
sometimes it's the other way.
Well, it's 50-50, right? I hear 50% of people say, like, I just need to do something easy. I like to take on the hardest thing just because it'll stress me out seeing it at the end of the list.
Yeah, me too. I think it depends on how your brain's feeling. If you're feeling like just looking at the list is so intimidating, sometimes just cleaning up the little things is easier than trying to tackle the big thing. It just depends on how you're feeling. You have to kind of know how your brain is that day.
The other thing I always did too, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but structure was everything for me. I had to book appointments in the homework center, the writing center, the office hours. It just became a non-negotiable for me with my ADHD.
Yeah.
Because I would just zone out and I would just procrastinate. But if I had to show up for somebody, the people pleaser side of me would be like, well, I should at least be somewhat prepared. Yeah. And then I would get through a tremendous amount pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Is that how it works for you as well?
Probably a little bit less so than it works for you, just because I am someone that's not really struggled to start things. I struggle to stop.
Yeah, we all have the struggle, right? It's whichever side, right?
Yeah. But I absolutely think that structure is huge. When I had like crazy classes and I knew that I had like 27 hours of classes a week or something insane like that, I would like budget in times to study. And it was actually in my calendar, like study for bio, study for chem, study. Like I gave myself like an hour at certain times of the day where I was like, this is what you're going to do at that point of time and nothing else.
One of the most counterintuitive things about memory, and I love to give advice, I'm terrible at myself, but is that it's this stress plus rest equals growth model. You actually taught me about this. So most people understand that if you work out hard, if you go lift weights or go for a run, you're stressing your muscles out. But they only get stronger if you rest. Yep. And then we see maximum growth.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out the brain is working the exact same way. Please talk me through this.
The number one thing that helps your memory is sleep. That's been like shown for years and years. Like sleep deprivation has been linked to Alzheimer's disease and all these types of things. So like sleep, huge for your memory. Sometimes people think that pulling all-nighters is good. Actually, your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that does memory, it recalls for you when you're sleeping. So instead of you having to actively recall everything, that's what dreams are, is your brain is recalling your memories of the day. And so when you sleep and when you rest, you're actually letting your brain do that recall process that lets it store it long term. And so sometimes we think of rest as sleep, but rest is also just letting your brain not focus on something difficult for a while. And I think that sometimes exercise is a really great way as a form of mental rest, because you can't be studying and like working out hard at the same time. And so sometimes that's a really good way to let your brain rest, is to go outside and go for a run. That was actually one of my favorite, I might be strange for this, but I loved exam season because I didn't have any classes during the exam prep time. And so I knew that I could get to like spend more time outside because I would study and then I would go for a run and then I would study again. And I actually really liked that because I felt like I got to eat good foods and I could spend more time cooking and I could spend more time exercising and then also focus on the academic sides.
That's the most Natalie thing
I know.
ever in the world. Saying, I loved exam season. You're like the only person I know. That's a really great insight, because I think one of the traps we all fall into is we focus, even when we actually are focusing, we're working hard, and then we're scrolling on our phone. Mm-hmm. So on a scale like 1 to 10, 1 is like you're asleep, 10, you've never focused harder. We're like at a 5 all day.
Yeah.
And then the days just kind of go by and our mind goes blank on tests.
Mm-hmm.
So in a perfect world scenario, how long would you focus for? And then what would that like rest look like for you?
So I think it depends on what you need to accomplish. If you know that you have a lot of content that you need to get through that day, you can do sort of like 45 minutes, 15 minutes, 45 minutes, 15 minutes. That's kind of pushing it out of the maximum amount of time that you want to be working hard at one point. But I personally would do like 30 to 45, 15-minute break, 30 to 45, 15-minute break, 2-hour break, and then go again type of deal.
Interesting, because I try to work for longer. And it gets to a point where it's just working against you.
Yep.
What do you do for your 15-minute breaks? What does that look like for you? Like if you really have to learn something. And this is perfect because we all mess up, right? We all get stuck in the feed. But perfect Natalie, what does that look like?
Perfect Natalie goes outside. That doesn't always happen. But that's what like the ideal is for me, is to go outside and like go find a squirrel. Just
zone out.
Go outside and like walk around for a second. Call a friend. Do something different. Go get a coffee. I find that anything where you get to go and like chat with somebody for a minute is always a really good break. Sometimes that can turn into too much, but
and I've heard, when you're focusing, especially like on information, like deeply focusing, it is good to have that walk or whatever. We're almost like zooming out into like landscape mode.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I think that's true for me. I don't know if that works for everybody, but I definitely find that just like getting out of the study space. I'm definitely a big person where I allocate spaces for different things. So right now I'm a student, but I also work in a lab and I also have like a home life. I don't work at home. I don't do lab work in the library. I don't do schoolwork in the lab.
Thank you for saying that. That's like, well, especially with ADHD. because I know that's not specifically what we're speaking to, but
Yeah.
I have to have certain spaces. Or if I try to work at home, I just have the type of brain where I'll be up all night. My brain is just racing because I've done all this work there.
Yeah.
So I have to actually leave my house, which takes more time, which can be inconvenient, but I have to leave my house and have a dedicated study space. And then my attention's actually pretty good after I form that routine.
Yeah. And I think you can work at home. Some people are fantastic at it. They have their laptop, they have their chair, they get themselves into that space, and then they can work really solidly because they've created that space within their home. But I think for a lot of us that do work outside of their home, you kind of need to leave to be able to do that work.
Yeah, and the people I know, because we probably primarily work with middle school, high school, and college kids.
Yeah.
One of the common things I hear from college kids is like, I can't focus. It's like, where are you studying? In my bed. And they're like, I can't sleep. Where are you studying? In your bed. Yeah. It's like the brain is trying to associate.
Yep.
Like it's mixed up. It's confused what it's supposed to be doing where.
Yeah.
And so thank you for saying you build out a study spot, because I think that is best for productivity, even if you can work at home. And even if it's at home, it's just having that study location at home.
Yeah. And I also have like reward study locations, which is like, if I know that I really need to get something done and I really don't want to do it, I'm going to go to a coffee shop. Because then I can have my little latte, have my headphones in, and feel like I'm happy about being at the coffee shop, and I'm happy about the little scone that I have. So then it'll force me to do the work that I have to do.
Do you feel public accountability there too?
Oh, yeah.
I'm
a big library person, a big coffee shop person.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too, where people feel they're almost embarrassed if they see if they're off track in a library or coffee shop. I'm not sure why, but they feel that.
It's that public eye. It like feels like someone's watching you in a good way, not in a...
And usually most people there don't care.
Yeah.
But if you feel, and you have, again, that goes back to accountability and structure, because a lot of times after we leave school, we struggle to find that.
Yeah.
But you can build that in other areas, even if you're not a student.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've shared so many amazing insights today. What is something about memory that most people don't understand?
I think the biggest thing about memory is that you can only hold so much. And your brain, one of its big jobs is to get rid of things that you don't need to try and make your brain more efficient. And so what you need to do, rather than fighting against that system, is work with it. So putting those importance tags on things that you really need, either through lots of recall or emotional attachment, allows your brain to get rid of the stuff that you don't need, but it lets you keep the things that are really important that you might need later on a test.
That's really helpful. I've always admired you because you can take a lot of big information, and you've always been really good at making it clear and concise, which really is learning. You and I talked about this with the note card before. When you take a lot of information and make it like clear and concise, you've learned it.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice you would give to everybody for doing that, for taking a lot of information, and I'm referring to studying, but take a lot of information and giving it that importance tag?
Tell your friends about it. If you can talk to your friends about something that you've learned and not have their eyes gloss over, that's when you know that you've actually learned it. Because if you can take a bunch of information and actually pull that important point out of it to the point that someone that doesn't know anything about it can understand it, that's when you know that you have studied it effectively.
Natalie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.